Have you ever thought the first time someone used numbers? Who came up with 1, 2, or 3? What does it even mean to say 1 or 2 or 3? We tend to think that numbers are eternal. It's something that we're born with, but that's not true. Numbers are quite a new invention. Humans have just been using numbers for only 10,000 years. Before that, they just never used numbers. Can you think about living without numbers? It wouldn't be wrong to say that the world would literally come to an end. What if I were to say that there were people in the Amazon rainforest that have no numbers in their language? Their language is really weird. They don't have any tenses, no plurals, and no numbers. There's a tribe called the Munduruku who have numbers, but just up to 5. They don't have numbers above 5. Can you think about living without numbers? It seems impossible, but they do. And the question is, do we really need numbers? What if we went to live with the Mundurukus? Would we be able to give them the gift of numbers? Or would we just adapt to living without numbers? Well, it turns out that since numbers are just 10,000 years old, we humans don't have a hard time giving them up. And that's exactly what happened with a French linguist, Pierre Pica. He was so intrigued by the language that he wanted to go and stay with them. He lived with them, and when he came back, he said that he had lost all his sense of time and space. He would forget his appointments, and he would get disoriented with simple directions. The practice of counting actually emerged from agriculture and trade. The sole reason of numbers was just so that you could do a fair business. The Mundurukus are farmers, and their lifestyle don't require them to count. Money has just entered their lifestyle. Not having a proper number system doesn't mean that they don't have the ability to distinguish between amounts. That's natural. We're all born with the ability to differentiate between 1 lion and 2 lions. But there's a big difference between having an idea of numbers to having a proper system with names and symbols for numbers. Numbers are so prevalent in our life that we just feel it's impossible to live without them. But that's not true. The Mundurukus are a prime example of how we can actually live without numbers. The Mundurukus just have numbers up to 5, which means if they want to say 6 or 7, they just don't. The sentence, "I have 6 chocolates," just doesn't exist for them because they never found the necessity to say 6. There's an interesting example where people still today don't use numbers. Jews aren't supposed to count other Jews because counting out people is actually like singling out people, and that makes them more vulnerable to malignant influences. And to make sure that there are at least 10 people in a synagogue, they say out a prayer that has 10 words in it, and then pointing out to each person as you say each word. Pica had gone to the rainforest to figure out what mathematical capabilities are universal. By now we know that numbers are not eternal. But one thing that we're born with is a sense of amount. We know when one tree has more fruits than the other, even without counting. But Pica wanted to figure out the spatial understanding of numbers. And so he conducted an experiment. He drew a line, essentially a number line, but of course the Mundurukus didn't know the concept of number line, and he placed 1 on this side of the line and 10 on the other side. Again, the Mundurukus did not know the symbols, and so he used dots. He placed 1 dot on this side of the line and 10 dots on the other side of the line, and then he gave them dots of different numbers and asked them to place it on the line. Well, the results were surprising. The Mundurukus felt that the intervals between number is larger when the numbers are smaller and smaller when the numbers are larger, which means the distance between 1 and 2 is larger than the distance between 9 and 10. That's just surprising. We feel that it's a self-evident truth that numbers are evenly spaced. That means the distance between 1 and 2 is the same as the distance between 9 and 10. The number line that we use today, where the distance between each number is the same, is called a linear one. But a scale on which the numbers get closer to each other as they get larger is called a logarithmic scale. And it turns out that the logarithmic approach is not just exclusive to the Munduruku tribe. The same experiment was done on kindergarten, grade 1 and grade 2 students. And what they found out is that the kindergarten students perceived number the same way as the Mundurukus do. But the grade 2 students perceive the number line just as we do. Let's try making sense as to why Mundurukus and the kindergarteners think that numbers get closer to each other as they get larger. You see, the Mundurukus believe that the distance between 1 and 5 is much larger than the distance between 5 and 10. But that's not the case with us. We believe that the distance between 1 and 5 is the same as the distance between 5 and 10. But it actually makes sense. 5 is 5 times bigger than 1, and 10 is only 2 times bigger than 1. And so for a Munduruku, 5 is closer to 10 than it is to 1. And it turns out that the Mundurukus seem to be using the same logic. They are judging amounts based on ratios of numbers. When you judge numbers based on ratios, you'll always come up with a logarithmic scale. It is believed that anyone who's never learned the linear scale has no other option but to view the world in a logarithmic way. And there is a really strong reason for this. We don't really need to count to survive in the wild, but we need to judge ratios to survive. For example, when faced with a group of wild animals, you should be able to estimate if the group of animals has more animals than your group. And you don't need to count each and every animal, you just need to estimate. This helps you decide to fight or flight. Another example is when looking for food. You should be able to decide which tree has more fruits on it. And you don't need to count each and every fruit on the tree, you just need to be able to estimate. And our brains have evolved like that. We still think in a logarithmic way. For example, we humans aren't really good with large numbers. We think the difference between 1 billion and 10 billion is the same as 1 and 10. That's not actually true. That's how the Mundurukus think, not us. But we still do think like that. We also perceive time in a logarithmic fashion. The older we get, the shorter a year seems to us. It's just so fascinating that how we perceive numbers is so different from what kindergartners and Mundurukus actually perceive the numbers as. It makes me think, are the numbers that we have actually the numbers? Have we got it all wrong about numbers? And if we've got everything wrong about numbers till now, does that mean we've got everything wrong about science? Because numbers are a basis of science, which is probably not the case, but it just makes me think. Alright, that was the video, and if you enjoyed it, make sure you hit the like button and consider subscribing. I'll see you next time.